Welcome to Focus Stack, the podcast where we layer conversations on creativity and photography. I'm your host, photographer and educator Jim Reiman, and in each episode, I'll be sitting down with different photographers to learn about the stories, techniques, and inspiration behind their work. From creative breakthroughs to industry challenges, we go beyond the frame to uncover what shapes a photographer's vision. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 2 of the Focus Stack podcast. Just going to take care of some general housekeeping things here. If you like the episode, please be sure to like and subscribe to the podcast on YouTube. And also, if you're on Instagram, we do have an Instagram account where I'll be posting different updates about upcoming episodes and things like that. And you'll also be able to see some behind the scenes stills and just other just fun information about the show as we make more episodes. Also, if you're a photographer and you want to be a guest on the show, in the description on both Instagram and on YouTube, there's a link tree and there's a link there for you to sign up to be a guest for a future episode. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce today's guest photographer. His name is Randy Brown. He's somebody I've known for quite a few years. He's a photojournalist and documentary photographer and just an all-around good guy. Everyone, meet Randy Brown. Hey, Randy.
Jim, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm pretty good. Great to be with you today.
Yeah, thanks for joining me. So, Randy, one of the ways that we start out the episodes is we ask the guests to kind of talk about their photographic path. How did you become interested in photography, and then where has that path led you?
Yeah, thank you. Interesting is that, we hear a lot of, photographers that say, well, I got my first camera, ... My uncle gave it to me. It was a gift. My first camera was a camera that I did not get. And I had a cousin whose father worked in China in the oil industry, back in the early 60s. And when he came back from one of his trips to China, he gave both of his sons, Yashica 35 millimeter film cameras. And I got to hold one of them. My cousin let me hold it for a while. And I just fell in love with it. And then, he left. He took the camera with him and didn't think about it, for a long time. And so I think it was always there, kind of resonating in the background. And then I had an opportunity when I left a position and when I was working in Dallas, Texas, back in 1980, had an opportunity to sell a house that I'd owned for a while and, made a couple of bucks off of that and earmarked $5,000 to go to Europe. And so I hopped on a plane with a one-way ticket, flew to London. And the night before I left, had a group of friends that had a party for me. And a couple of them, one of them was a photojournalist for the Dallas Morning News. The other one worked for the Dallas Times Herald. And one of them said, what camera are you taking with me? And I just kind of shrugged my shoulders and I said, what? And so he raced off, went to his house, brought back to the party an Olympus OM1 camera and say, here, take this, and here's a brick of Triax film. A brick at the time was 20 rolls of film. So that was really where it sort of began, where I just sort of didn't really know that much. And so went to Europe and I was there for 8 months and made a lot of photographs. And that's kind of where I fell in love with it. And I understood what a camera can do. And mainly because of an exhibit that I saw in Paris of Henri Cartier-Bresson. And when I saw that, I was sort of dumbfounded. This is what you can do with a camera. And so I think that, like a lot of people, I think Cartier-Bresson was a powerful influence on, many photographers. And so I think that's where it sort of occurred to me. This is, I have the ability to do this with a camera. And so that was probably where my photography passion finally started to get synthesized. Yeah, so when I got back to Texas and Dallas, and so I sort of, and that's where I was living before I left. And when I came back, I took a few classes at a community college in Dallas, and they had some photography classes, and so that's where I started to learn more about the dark room, and I was able to process all my film that I'd shot when I was in Europe, and so and then taking the classes and working on composition, mainly doing street photography,
Mhm.
and so both of the classes had the same instructor in two sequential classes, and she was really kind of focused on street photography, and that's where sort of developed into a photojournalism context.
Mhm.
And soon I migrated to Denver, at a 63 VW bus, the kind with 18 windows on it, and I sort of made that into put a bed in the back of it, started traveling in that bus, and when I got to Denver and decided, this was probably pretty good place to be. And so I got a job at B&W Photo as a black and white lab owned by a photographer in Denver, a very well-known photographer, Nick DeSoyce. And so I started processing film and making contact sheets and doing a lot more street photography, and started bumping into some other photographers. This was late '81, early '82, and so I bumped into some Denver Post and Rocky Mountain News photographers at the Denver Press Club, and I think Nick sort of suggested that maybe I should kind of go by there and see what's happening. So I started making those inroads with photojournalists, and consequently started. While I was working at the photo lab, I was also started stringing for the Denver Post, Rocky Mountain News, and Associated Press. And so that's when I started getting some traction.
It seems like your education and the experience in Europe and seeing Cartier-Bresson's work, like all of that, kind of has. I can see how that definitely kind of set you on the trajectory for the work that you're creating now. Would you like to talk about some of the projects that you're working on right now? Because I know you're doing some really interesting stuff with San
Yeah,
Luis Valley and stuff.
yeah,
So
absolutely. That'd be great.
yeah, do you want to go ahead and pull up the website?
Yeah, yeah, go ahead.
Okay. All right.
One thing I'll just make a quick note of is that and when I was doing a lot of stringing for the Post and the Rocky and AP, you know, get maybe $20 a photo if it gets published, and so I wasn't really making any money then. I couldn't really support myself, so I got sort of pulled away from that kind of work by doing some commercial work, which paid the bills. And when we look at this work now, and a lot of the work we're going to see on the website is that as me, I feel like it's a homecoming. I've come back home.
Hmm.
Some almost 40 years later, I've come back home to the work that really is inspiring for me.
Yeah, I know you did some architectural work for a little while, right?
Yep, yep.
Yeah. What other type of commercial work? Was it mostly architecture or?
Yeah, it was architecture. It was some doing annual reports for a couple of energy companies and one mining company, which was, that kind of work is at the time was very lucrative.
So we have your website pulled up here, and if you're watching this at home, please visit Randy's website, randybrownphotographer.com, and you can check out some of this work for yourself. But Randy, where do you want to start?
Yeah, this landing page is most of this work is a project I'm working in the Colorado San Luis Valley about scarce water, the Rio Grande River, and climate change and drought. And so is portrait work along with some landscape work. And so if we can go to that portfolio in the middle of everywhere portfolio, I can sort of show you a
Right
little bit
here.
about. Yep.
All right.
Yeah, and so I have 25 acres of land in the San Luis Valley, and so my partner and I have been considering building a house there. So I've got a lot of connections down there anyway, and I sort of caught wind of the fact that there's a water development company in one of the suburbs of Denver that is, trying to export water out of the San Luis Valley. San Luis Valley is the highest desert, highest in altitude desert on the planet, and it's about almost 8,000 feet. The San Luis Valley is about 60 miles wide and about almost 100 miles long, and very dry. But it's also the headwaters of the Rio Grande River. And so this this water development company, was trying to sort of extract water from the San Luis Valley, one of the poorest areas of Colorado, and export it to one of the wealthiest communities in the U.S. And so it was quite controversial. So I took as a documentary photographer, and I took a sort of a stance on this, is that I was, sought out, farmers and ranchers and truck drivers, um, people who, were, bartenders, clerks at grocery stores, the people that would be impacted by losing water rights to the Front Range of Colorado. So they would lose their jobs, they would lose their way of life. And so that was my passion with this project, is to create a project that really does speak to the existential threats of the loss of water, and especially the exportation of water.
Yeah, I mean, you can't live without water.
That's
So,
pretty important.
yeah. Is there any particular image that you'd like to talk specifically about, or?
Yeah, I would say, we can just cycle through if you want to maybe start off at the top, and we can
Okay.
cycle through. This is interesting. So this is uh, uh, the initial fixer that I had in this project. I soon met and was introduced to this woman, Rio de la Vista, which,
Mm.
what does that mean? The view of the river.
Mhm.
And she lives on, she has a house that's right on the Rio Grande River. So it's kind of interesting and she has this great place with a picture window that looks at the river. So she has a house with a great view of the river, and that's her name, is Rio de la Vista. But
That's pretty cool.
she worked for the Salazar Center, which is at Adams State College, which is in Alamosa, Colorado, and the Salazar Center is named after Ken Salazar, who was a U.S. senator and in Colorado, and so his family they have a center mostly based around agriculture and water in both Colorado State University in Fort Collins and at Adams State in the San Luis Valley in Alamosa, which is where their family um, has lived for since the late 1800s. And so Rio ran that center, and plus she really introduced me to a lot of maybe the first 3 or 4 people that I photographed. And if you want to go forward, then so she made these introductions, and I think next might be George Whitten. Yeah, so this is George Whitten. There's several of the ranches and farms that I've worked with here are known as Centennial ranches, Centennial farms, and those are farms that have been in the same family for over 100 years. And so I was really drawn to them first because um, those are probably when you think about a farm or a ranch being in the same family for that long, then the threat of water exploitation would really impact them on many levels, but also a historical one. And I think the Centennial farms and ranches are really instrumental in maintaining their viability. And so George is a great guy, and we'll see in a minute so he runs a San Juan ranch with his family, and so they were the first people that Rio introduced me to.
Hmm.
And so it's one of those things where you exchange numbers. Say, hey, I'll be there. And they'll say come at 10 o'clock on a Wednesday, or actually it was more like 5:30 a.m. on a Wednesday,
Hmm.
and because they start pretty early, and so I sort of kind of followed them around for about 4 days and did some interviews. I'm also, in addition to photographing stories, I'm also recording interviews with everyone and writing stories for a newspaper in that area. So George was just, this great guy who welcomed me into his home, and we had dinner, and we did, just really exemplary, and as far as being friendly and open to a conversation.
That's great. The other day I was teaching my students about W. Eugene Smith and the country doctor photo
Mhm.
essay. And part of that is he was able to make the connection with the doctor and kind of just hang out with the doctor to the point where he was kind of invisible to the doctor. Do you feel like you kind of go through a similar process when you're working with the subjects out in the field?
Yeah, no, that's best case scenario.
Yeah.
When you don't ask too many questions, at least initially, it's how do you don't get in anyone's face initially. You kind of stay back, and like you were saying, kind of a fly on the wall. You're
Mhm.
paying attention to everything that's going on. You're waiting for the right timing. You're
Mhm.
anticipating based on movements that they make and makes based on the expressions that they have. So you can sort of anticipate kind of what's going to happen next, just based on those
Mhm.
experiences. And so, yeah, I think you really want to just make sure that the ideal part of it is that they just forget that you're there.
Mhm. Do you want me to go on to another image or?
You bet.
Yeah. Okay.
And this is David Colville and his daughter Sienna. She's in Fort Lewis College in Durango right now, studying to be an attorney. And their ranch is the Corset Ranch, and they came into existence in the late 1880s. And so, this is first I interviewed David and Sienna, and then after that, we kind of walked around. This is, obviously, the portraits that we were going to see here are where I'm having really direct contact with them, and this is what I like more about doing documentary work is that I can, to some degree, I can select a place to photograph my subjects, and I can sort of communicate with them, and so I can sort of really get the kind of content that I want. But this is, and they talked a lot about this tree that is in the background. I think they said this is, and their property has about 2 miles of the Rio Grande River on it, and I think they have around about 5,000 acres.
Mm.
And so I really wanted to, their gestures are really similar. There's just something about this father and daughter photograph that it really is appealing to me, and I also like the content. When we look at compositions and photography, and is that I think especially in this one, this compositionally, this sort of rule of thirds
Mhm.
perspective on this one with the fence, and then my primary subject on the left, and then having the trees on the right. So it really kind of works in that regard. And I usually shoot pretty tight. I don't really leave, especially in the top or bottom. I don't leave a lot of space above, unless there's something really dramatic going on in the sky. I don't, and fortunately here we had kind of a cloudy day and had some great, soft lighting for this photograph. But and then I did, there's some other work from that I did on the ranch too that we'll see in a bit.
Okay. One thing that the project is about the water scarcity, and so far, what we've seen is a lot of portraiture. And I was just curious about if you could talk about how you're utilizing portraiture to talk about the environmental thing, where maybe another photographer might photograph more on the landscape
Yeah.
itself.
Yeah, and I've done some more. And one thing you'll find on this project, you won't see very many photographs of water. And I kind of intentionally stayed away from this. And I think this is, you know, the people really are where the water is. I mean, part of it is, physiologically, we're about 70% water, and their lifeblood is water. So it kind of had. I've got another project with veterans, and the subtitle is "The River in Us." And I think this is kind of the way I see this is the landscape is really important, but when I look at the individuals, that's where I see water. And yeah, certainly environmental portraits will have a fair amount of the landscape in it, and the sort of the culture of the landscape when you have a high valley like this that is this enormous and it's relatively flat, with the exception on the western side is the Continental Divide, and on the eastern side is the Sangre de Cristos, which are the most rugged and technically difficult to climb mountains in Colorado. And there's probably between the San Juans and the Sangre de Cristos, there's probably a dozen mountains that are above 14,000 feet, and probably 50 or 60 that are above 13,000 feet. So it's a pretty rugged landscape. And certainly there are a lot of photographs of the landscape.
All right. Well, would you like me to move to the next?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and this is what I call a valley comet. And
It's a great title.
And one of the things that when I'm on these dirt roads all the time, and my car is full of dust. I'm full of dust. All the wrinkles that I have are full of dust, and this is where it happens, because a lot of times when I'm on the dirt roads and there's another vehicle approaching, we just it's kind of these two things that are coming together, and when you see the road and everything gets filled with dust. And here I'm about probably about 2,000 feet above the valley on the western slope of the Sangre de Cristos, and I came down here at this time of day, and so this is like I see this as someone that's commuting. It's about 5:30. It's in the summer. It's about 5:30 in late afternoon, and when you think about commuting, then this is very likely someone commuting or going to see a neighbor, or maybe going into the closest town here is about 20 miles away, and maybe going in running some errands. But I was just struck by this particular landscape.
It's a really beautiful image, and I love the title.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. Go ahead and go to the next image here.
And there's on the San Juan Ranch, which we saw George in the beginning. They have interns that are working on their ranch, and Noli was in one of the interns and still is, and she migrated from New York State and applied for an internship here, and then migrated from New York State to work with the Wittens, because they're certified organic ranch. They have best practices in grass management for their cattle, and so she was really looking at working for a ranch that are sort of exhibiting these kinds of practices. And the light was great. Very and this is one of the challenges, especially people that work on ranches, as we all know, are fairly isolated, and they can go an appreciable amount of time before they see someone or talk to someone that they don't already know. And I think this is one of the skills that I think is works for me really well, is I really have this ability to establish trust with people.
Mm-hmm.
And even some people are still really hesitant, and I think here in doing portraits is just being patient and not really forcing anything, and always talking. When I'm photographing people, I'm talking quite a bit, and then when I start to see something really, the magic starts to happen, and they sort of let their guard down a little bit, then I think that's when sometimes you get your best work, when that so there's that energy exchange.
Mm-hmm.
And I think here that was it didn't take long. I think initially she was very shy and didn't really what do we hear a lot? Oh, I don't like my picture taken.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say I don't take pictures, I make photographs. I work with people, and we can be really patient and those kind of things. And sometimes it's maybe if someone says that, then you go to, if there's somebody else like her partner, Sam, that you'll see a photograph of in a minute. Just went to Sam and started photographing him, and he was really relaxed, and then went back here and really made something happen.
Something that you just said, you were talking about the sort of like skills that you have that you've kind of built. And I would describe you as somebody who's very patient, empathetic, understanding, really respectful. A lot of starting photographers, they struggle with the ability to talk to people. But do you have any advice for them to help build those skills, to those types of, like active listening and conversational skills?
Yeah, I was, early in my career, I didn't photograph very many people at all. And actually, it kind of scared the hell out of me. And because I didn't have that confidence to do it. And and either you have, a couple of things. Sometimes you'll have it, based on how you grew up. You're comfortable around people, and it kind of comes natural. For me, it really wasn't, and so I think it's one of those kind of things that developed over time. I think my best advice is to just be yourself, and it's okay. It's okay in the beginning until you get enough practice in to be a little intimidated, maybe. But the important thing, as I mentioned, is establishing trust, because I think if there's not that, and sometimes that's just silent communication,
Mm-hmm.
where you smile at people, or if you're talking to someone like this, then that's not very friendly. But if you
Mm-hmm.
lean into someone without getting too close, without really invading their personal space, it illustrates that you're interested, and you have a level of authenticity, and they trust you. And so that's something that uh, honestly, that I developed over time. It probably, honestly, it probably took me a couple of years, because I was doing mostly sort of photojournalism work, where I was doing like spot news, those kind of things. But once I started doing more portrait work in the corporate world, is when it occurred to me, because my clients expected me to get, really great expression from their clients, and so I had to figure it out, or I would lose work.
Yeah.
And, and so I think that's just, sometimes it's just a must thing.
So it's kind of interesting to see like that you built some of those skills doing the more corporate commercial work, and then brought it back into your photojournalism and documentary work.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I
Yeah.
think that was a critical part of this, we'll call it evolution.
All right. Do you want to keep going through this portfolio?
Yeah, let's do a couple more here, and then
Okay.
we can go to another.
Okay. All right. Potatoes.
Yeah, potatoes. This was one of the first shoots that I did for this project. And yeah, just really, this is what the valley is about. It's a very sandy. The valley is very, most of the soil is very sandy, but it's also very fertile,
Mm-hmm.
and it's perfect for potatoes. And so I think just getting down with a low perspective and sort of creating a composition, we have what's being farmed, we have the people that are sorting, we have some aspects of the machinery, and then it's all going into a storage warehouse.
Mm-hmm. And going back to the water as sort of the source of the project, like the potatoes are sort of like little vessels that contain the water within the ground.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is, interestingly enough, the valley is already exporting billions of gallons of water um, every year in the form of potatoes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really interesting.
And this is Jillian, George Whitten's partner at the San Juan Ranch, and Jillian, very knowledgeable, just wonderful ecologist, biologist, and her and George met up later in life, and are both running the San Juan Ranch now. And this one, I think for Jillian, I really wanted to sort of show, do more of a wide angle and illustrate the vastness and the flatness of the San Luis Valley, and also with this really air of confidence that she has. And in the distance, about 40 miles away, you see the horizon of the San Juan Mountains, which are coming about 7,000 feet out of the valley.
On this one, could you talk to me about the like tilted perspective that you chose to put in this? Because it's really interesting, like the stature at which they're standing, and then you're using this sort of like tilted perspective, and it's almost like the is that, I don't know what the structure is on the far right, but it's kind of interesting, the balancing act between the structure and the subject, and then just this sort of like horizon.
Right. Yeah. I think I mean, I think, obviously, I mean, some things we don't always, we sense in our photographs.
Mhm.
Uh, and when we're making them, but we don't always I mean, I guess the question is, can you sense something without really seeing it? And I think that's where the sort of the intuitive kind of process is of it here, because I think, I felt like I wanted her straight because I'm shooting wide angle,
Mhm.
and had the horizon been straight, then she would have been sort of falling back,
Mhm. Mhm.
and I wanted to keep her straight. I thought that was more important. And it was only after I saw the photographs that I said, well, wait a minute, you better straighten that horizon. I said, no, I'm not going to straighten the horizon. And after that, it just kind of appeals to me. And I've gotten questions about that before. Uh, and she said, and I've had people say, well, wait a minute, it's just slanting that much? I said, no, it's a straight horizon. But, sometimes what does it come down to? I like it.
Yeah.
It just,
Okay.
that's what it comes down to.
I think they're like, I started reading in that like she's kind of the one that's like holding the photo in place there.
Hmm.
Um, and I wasn't sure if that was something like subconsciously that you're kind of building into it, or intentionally, or so.
Yeah, no, I think, there's probably, I would say it was probably more subconscious than it was intentional. And just because I wanted her body to be straight, I didn't want to have to do a
Mhm.
lot of perspective corrections.
Mm. All right. Should I go on to
Yeah,
another one?
why don't we go back to the main portfolio? There might be one or two. Yeah, just go up to that portfolio where we were just looking at. And
Okay.
I'd say, the one, so we see David working on this. So when we were out, he was out, I was riding with him in his hay cutter on that. Yeah,
That's this.
that photograph right there.
Yeah.
And he hit a rock in one of the teeth. They call them shark.
Oh, yeah, I
They,
see that.
one of the shark teeth broke, and
Okay.
we had to go back to the barn so he could fix it. And I felt like, I think the next photograph is a shot from behind him, sort of looking out from the barn. And I thought, well, I like that, but I really need to get on the ground and get down there with him. And one of the things what that does is, if you're in this kind of environment and you don't mind getting dirty and crawling in the dirt, then you start to gain that trust and confidence in the people that you're photographing. If you know how to ride a horse, if you don't mind, if you step in a cow pie, you don't, panic over, those kind of things. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
well, this is what they do. So well, so I thought, if David's down here doing this, well, why am I not down there with him? And so I think that one, these are the kind of photographs that I think help, further establish trust.
Yeah, you're not afraid to get down in it with the people you're photographing.
Yeah.
I remember it was maybe a couple years ago. I asked you how your weekend was, and you're like, "Oh, I was just jumping fences and climbing over stuff." And I was just like, "Man, that's awesome.
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
that's great."
Ripping pants on barbed wire fences, and, making friends with horses, and,
Mhm.
those kind of things.
All
Yeah,
right,
so
so
we'll go to another portfolio.
sure,
Let's do the river in us.
okay. And this is the Veterans Project.
Yep. And so I was contacted actually through one of the colleagues at the Rocky Mountain College of Art and Design, where I teach. that had a friend who owned a rafting company based in Durango, Colorado, that worked with, it's called Rafting for Recovery.
Mm.
And the individual, Sean, who ran the company, is a Iraq, Afghanistan vet. And so he has this Rafting for Recovery, which works with veterans that have issues with PTSD, and specifically within PTSD, issues with addiction.
Mm.
And so Sean and I did a few emails back and forth. He said, "Well, yeah, we got this thing. I'm leaving in a week." And he asked me if I could do it, and I said yes. And without getting approval from my supervisor at the time. At the time, I was chairing the program, but I had to get uh, uh, the okay with at the time it was the dean of faculty, and so they said, okay, yeah, go for it. And so a week after getting that email, I was on the Colorado River, and so we did an 8-day raft trip um, through on the Colorado River. We our put in site was near Moab, Colorado, and we got out right when the Colorado River goes into Lake Powell, and or well, yeah, into Lake Powell, and so and it's an area called the Cataract Canyon, which is one of the most at maximum flow is one of the most significant parts of the Colorado River because the elevation drops significantly in about 25 miles, and so we spent 8 days on the river.
It sounds like a great experience.
And again, I thought I just sort of went, so this was before the San Luis Valley Project, and so I think, in this body of work, it was really about the people and their process of recovery. So we did a lot of things. We did hikes, and obviously on the river, about 6 hours every day, and so really they wanted me to do some portraits and sort of testimonials from these individuals, and so we didn't see many of the landscapes in the San Luis Valley thing, but yeah, here, I think, the landscape was so dramatic,
Mhm.
and that you just sort of kind of have to do that.
As you were talking about it, I was kind of imagining the way it would have been drifting down the river and seeing this, and that's kind of why I clicked on it first because
Yeah, yeah,
it's just an impressive place.
yeah. And those walls are rising about 1,000 feet above the river.
Mm. Do you want me to go back to any particular images,
So, yeah, whatever.
or just kind of go to the next one and
Yeah,
see?
definitely.
Okay.
Yeah, so we did one hike up from the river, and you can see just on the other side of this Chris, you can see the river sort of way down below. And we hiked up this area called the Dollhouse, which is a lot of slot canyons that were sort of carved mostly by wind. And so it was a pretty brutal hike to get up here. But the goal was I think we left at about 4:30 in the morning in the dark, and we wanted to be up here because they always want to go up and have witness a sunrise here. And so that's where this particular photograph. And this is near the junction of the Green River, which comes out of Wyoming, and it snakes its way down to its junction with the Colorado River. Yeah, and Clint was, I mean, I think that's, when you think about it, this individual um, was probably the most sort of had the hardest time in sort of integrating in with this, with the rest of the people.
Mm.
And so we found Clint, sort of on his own quite a bit, but also some of the, I'd say, elders, the individuals that may be in their early 40s or late 30s were kind of constantly reaching out to him and mentoring him and This is more of a kind of a candid portrait. And I like squares, and a
Yeah.
lot of times I'll shoot when I'm doing portraiture work. I'll shoot for square.
Yeah. I like squares too.
Yep.
Can you talk to me more about the just like what the vibe was like, kind of moving through the river with this group of people who are all kind of dealing with different things. I mean, we're all dealing with different things, right? But like, this is some pretty intense stuff. And like, how did you like make connections? And what was that experience like?
Yeah, I think again, being kind of careful and not doing too much too soon. I think the first night that we got organized, and then we were actually going to be on the river the next day. We were camping on the one of the banks in the river. Is that they didn't know me. They had no idea who I was, so I had to sort of introduce myself, and then also at the same time, I didn't really make. I might have made a few photographs that first night
Hmm.
because I didn't want to. I just didn't want to just dive in with this crazy man with a camera hopping around making photographs. So I was pretty careful about that because I knew the gravity of. I didn't know unless you know
Hmm.
you can't know the gravity of people that have been in war if you haven't been in war.
Right.
And so I had to sort of make it known to them that I don't get this. I understand it. I can guess on how uh, uh, incredible in the sense of incredibly powerful it is to be shot at, to have bombs exploding around you, to have all of these kind of things that are imprint you. And I can know that it happened, but since I wasn't there, I can't. I can have empathy, but I can't totally understand it.
Hmm.
And so I think I really tried to make that clear early on, and a lot of it is just without talking too much, without asking too many questions too early,
Hmm.
without getting in people's faces with my camera too early. So I think really the first 3 days, I did pretty much all candids, photographed the river, photographed, and there's not a lot in this on the website of the there's a few of rafts going through rapids and water splashing, those kind of things. But this was, I felt, honestly, I felt kind of uncomfortable about this until probably about day 5.
Okay.
And not that it didn't stop me from, photographing everything, but it's probably day 5 where I felt like I was kind of accepted. Uh,
Hmm.
I've not ever served in the military, and I made it known to all the individuals here that I had not, and because I didn't want to try to have that conversation. I just up front I said, look, I've never been in your shoes,
Hmm.
and so this one, like I said, it was pretty difficult until we got near the end of the thing because I can't imagine. And Clint had tragically lost his life about 3 months after we got
Oh,
from this trip.
3 months after this trip.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
And fortunately, his family reached out to me, so I had a bunch of photographs of him,
Mm.
and probably the last photographs that were made of him.
Mm.
And so the family was very appreciative that I had shared those with them.
I imagine those photos were really important, and like, I mean, this is a really nice portrait. He looks kind of at peace, looking off into the is it the setting sun or the rising sun?
Yeah, this is rise. This is just right after sunrise.
Okay. All right. Well, let's. Is there any particular shots, particular photos you'd like me to
Yeah,
go
let's
and
yeah let's
visit?
go back to the main page on this.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, I think the one in Clint there, laying down on the
Oh,
raft. Um,
here.
yeah, that one. I think that one is. Um, I think it's both kind of a portrait and a landscape
Mm-hmm.
at the same time. I think, and I think I think I think my opinion about some of these is probably based on the fact that Clint lost his life
Mm-hmm.
later. Nearer the end is when let's go back to the main page on these. Um, yeah, you can see this one photograph. You can see on the second row the people are standing on the bottom of a raft.
On the second row.
Yeah,
I'm
go up
sorry.
right there. Yeah, nope, go down one.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Is it
That one right
this
there.
one? Okay, got it. Oh yeah.
This one was interesting because it's one of the exercises, like a teamwork exercise.
Mm.
And so they would turn the raft upside down, and there was one rope that went kind of through everyone, but they had to, when you talk about supporting each other and going through rapids, and so they were holding on the rope, but they were also holding on to each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is sort of emblematic of this whole process of blending self-reliance with teamwork
Mm.
and using those ideas as as sort of in a recovery context. I think the other ones. I think the landscapes. I probably when we got near the end is when I started doing. After that period where I became more comfortable, and I think they did too. I started doing more of the portraits, and you'll see these which are more directed
Mm-hmm.
portraits sort of scattered throughout here. And so I think in that regard, I think those, uh, and they were all photographed within, and, one was in the morning before we set out on a day, and a few others were when we arrived on that same day in the evening. And I think this is where, the connections with these individuals really started to gel is because I had some one-on-one time with them
Mm-hmm.
and sort of talk about their journeys and sort of just to kind of connect as individuals.
As I'm looking at this portfolio from the sort of like bird's eye view here, um, the sequencing, I can see you're kind of like you're putting the landscapes and the portraits and all of these are in black and white, but then when you get down to the bottom there's this one in color, and I was just wondering if you could talk about your decision to kind of how you sequenced it, if it's intentional in the way that it's arranged. What was the intention with color?
Well, this is honestly, this probably should be in black and white. But because it's a sunrise, there's and I think the blues and the greens and those kind of things. I see that I like. Other than that, I think the sequencing. I think in any kind of story is that, um, uh, and I just got through teaching a photo essay class, and sequencing the photographs are critical. In that, at the end, you want to have a photograph that um, suggests a future.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't matter how profound the story is. If it's about abuse, if it's about whatever it is, if it's something that's really based on important events in people's lives, uh, you want to finish with a photograph that really does suggest, oh, okay, we're moving on.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, we're looking at a horizon in this case. We're looking at a beautiful sunrise. We're on this enormous rock, and then you can see the river and the canyon down below. So to me, that suggests that, and everybody's relaxed. They're back. They're laying down. It's a quiet moment, and so for me, that's sort of a great way to sequence the a story that sort of temporarily finishes the story. I don't know if anything's ever actually finished, because these people all went on to have their own lives after this. But it's a way to suggest that there's a future, and here in this that there's a positive future. And yeah, I think sometimes, I don't know, maybe I'm the only one. Sometimes I do things I go like, why is this in color? And and you question that, and it's a kind of legitimate question to ask.
Well, this is the only one in these two
Yeah.
particular ones that's in color. Actually, I was wondering maybe if you could talk more about your. It seems like you lean more towards black and white in these cases, and that's a choice. And maybe
Yeah.
you could talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's kind of how I grew up. I think the first, in photography, especially when I went to Europe and I had a bunch of tri-X, is I learned how to see through the context of black and white. And I think one of the things that, and especially in seeing in Paris, seeing the work of Cartier-Bresson, that was probably one of the best educational tools I've ever had, is looking at that work. And I was in Paris for about 4 weeks, and had an opportunity to really just sort of look at it from that perspective, and to see shape and form and light, and try to not even see color at all. And so, and especially I think look, I mean, a lot of documentary photographers, photojournalists, especially now, are shooting color. And so I don't think it's, at one time it was almost required that, even with film back in the 80s and 90s, and until the time digital kind of came in, I suppose. But most photographers were always shooting in black and white, and a lot of it was because, and especially for me, when I was stringing for the newspapers and for Associated Press, if I was shooting, like on a Wednesday, I'd go into the newspaper, I'd go up to the editorial floor, and I'd go into the dark room, and I'd process my own film, and I'd make prints and leave them on the editor's desk. And so that was really that was the only opportunity we had. They didn't have as far as I know, they didn't have a color processor at the paper then. And so that's kind of where, that's the way I see. And I think it's, to me, it just, I don't want the interruption of color. And that's just my choice. Other people would say, color is not interruptive. Color is more informative. I think both are wrong and both are right.
Yeah, I mean, black and white, it has that rich tradition, but also it has like a connection to, like a, not necessarily a direct connection, but it implies the truth in some ways. And I think it's because of the long history with photojournalism, but it's also very expressive. So yeah, I'm just kind of curious, just kind of seeing this collection here.
Yeah, and I haven't, obviously shooting everything digital, and I haven't, and even in working in my the stories in the San Luis Valley project that I've written and photographed, there was never any question that, even though the paper uses a lot of color, there was never any question there was going to be anything other than black and white. And that's just kind of where I am. And honestly, I can't really anticipate not being exclusive to black and white, for my work moving forward. I suppose if Rolling Stone said, "Hey, we love what you're doing, but you got to shoot this in color," I was like, "Yeah."
Go back and process the raw files in color.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Randy. This is great looking through your portfolio, and I know you're going to keep making some great work. I'm going to go ahead and exit out of the screen share. And, I did want to close off with just maybe a couple questions for you.
Sure.
For photographers that are maybe just getting started, and they want to do documentary or photojournalism, what sorts of things, what type of advice might you have for them to get them out there?
Yeah, and I know you probably experienced this too, but I would talk to a lot of photographers, especially students coming in. Oh, I want to work for National Geographic.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody
Yeah.
wants to do that, and that's fine. That's a great goal to have. And my perspective was, so what's happening in your backyard? The easiest thing, the best thing you can do right now is look for stories that are in your backyard, and you can start developing a portfolio based on what's more readily accessible to you. And but how do you do that? And so I think you have to ask questions. You have to have a genuine interest in people. You, even if it's a person that delivers your mail, and you say, hey, what's up? You do, you have to be curious. I think in just about any kind of creative endeavor, and just about anything that human beings do to occupy ourselves, curiosity is the best tool that you have. Because without that, then maybe we don't ask questions of people. We don't, see someone doing Tai Chi at a local park, and wait for an opportunity to go over and say, hey, I'm really interested in this, and I'm wondering if I can, make a few photographs of you, and then that, you have to be able to knock on doors, and you have to most of the time I think you have to open the doors yourself,
Mm.
and without being aggressive, without being uh, overbearing, and I think that's something, I think to me that's the best tool you can have in the course of living life. And if you have a camera, then that in itself is a suggestion. When you walk up to someone with a camera around your neck or over your shoulder, then their expectation is that you're going to ask them something about being photographed.
Mm.
And so you're already kind of set up. People are already going, oh no, there comes somebody with a camera. Or they're going to say, oh, there's somebody with a camera.
Mhm.
And you have to be able to break down walls. And
Mhm.
because it's not uncommon for those invisible walls to be there. And again, your curiosity, your authenticity, you being trustworthy is those are the best tools that you'll ever have.
Yeah, even more powerful than the camera itself.
I'd say yes. Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the people that I've interviewed, you know, I think sometimes my camera is only an excuse, a vehicle, a tool for me to meet people.
Hmm.
Sometimes the photographs are secondary, because I get to meet people, I get to ask them about their lives. We sit down for a couple of hours, and what I do is I have a lavalier mic, and I use Bluetooth with my iPhone,
Hmm.
and I record the interviews, and we sat down and talked. The interviews go, really well for the most time, and I find people asking me about myself,
Hmm.
and so those times are, I mean, they're magic, and I come away with it. Oh my God! Look what I learned today.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, Randy, thank you so much for joining on these early episodes of the podcast. And what's on the horizon? Any new projects?
Yeah, so I've done just about all I can do in Colorado on this Rio Grande River project, and so next part of it is funding, part of it is having time. So the next part of it is in. I've already spent some time in New Mexico, especially with the pueblos in and around Santa Fe. So and people who live on the river. So my plan is this year is to go from the Colorado border on the river down to El Paso, Texas. And I'll start.
Great.
I'm going to have my first foray into that next week.
Oh, excellent. So will people be able to see updates on your Instagram and website as things continue?
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
So, and your Instagram is Randy Brown
Yeah,
Photographer,
just Randy Brown.
oh, I'm sorry, what was it?
Yeah, just Randy Brown.
Oh, okay, great.
It's like underscore Randy underscore Brown. But if you
Okay,
just search Randy Brown,
it'll
I should
come up.
say that.
All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing your work with us and your stories. And yeah, I look forward to seeing where your new projects take
Yeah.
off from here.
Yeah. Thank you, Jim. A pleasure to talk to you.
Yeah, always a pleasure to talk to you as well. If you enjoyed the show, please like, subscribe, and leave us a comment. It helps us connect with more photography lovers just like you.